This episode is brought to you by Progressive Insurance. Fiscally responsible, financial geniuses, monetary magicians. These are things people say about drivers who switch their car insurance to Progressive and save hundreds. Visit Progressive.com to see if you could save. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Potential savings will vary, not available in all states or situations.
And on the Michael Medved show, there is a headline in the Daily Beast that says, Trump humiliated again by Putin with peace talks collapse. Was this unexpected? Was this something predictable? And where do we go from here? And where do we go concerning Venezuela with the bombing going on, the attacks on these so-called drug boats? All of this, very, very few people to give us a better perspective than Ralph Peters, who is a prize-winning, best-selling novelist and the author of innovative works on strategy and security, a retired U.S. Army officer and a former enlisted soldier as well. His unusual career has taken him from Moscow to Mandalay and from the Middle East to Latin America. After leaving the military, he's also worked as a columnist, a popular media commentator, and a strategic scout in the developing world. Ralph Peters, are you surprised to hear that the peace talks that involved like 5 hours for Jared Kushner and Steve Witkoff yesterday? After 5 hours with President Putin, the peace talks collapsed today, apparently. A surprise?
No, not a surprise, but a relief. Because frankly, Trump has intermittently, with hiccups here and there, has been doing pretty much what Putin wanted, Putin's bidding. And obviously, the 28-point plan generated by Moscow and brought back for Trump's approbation would have been a disaster. I mean, Ukraine could not possibly agree. After fighting for almost 4 years, Ukraine can't just give up their land, agree never to join NATO, cut their army in half. It was silly. But I think one problem we have is there are still so many people among the intelligentsia to overuse a barely appropriate word here and in Europe, still don't understand how good Putin is at manipulating people. Now, he may have ultimately made a pretty nasty mistake thinking he could run over Ukraine, but he certainly can run over Western politicians. And for once, the Europeans are much more savvy. Of course, they're much closer to Russia and Ukraine than we are. And the last thing I'll say on that for now, Michael, answer any questions you have. But the collapse of the peace talks this time around gave Ukraine another lease on life. And the Ukrainians will use it as wisely as they can. But it is a travesty that President Trump, has cut support to Ukraine, which is fighting for its freedom and has been. We've discussed that. And now you've got people in the West saying, well, look, there's a corruption scandal in Ukraine. They're corrupt. Why should we support them? Well, they're fighting corruption. They're dismissing people, investigating people. Russia is the most corrupt major country on earth, and they get a free pass. So at any rate, I remain 100% pro-Ukrainian. I do recognize the skill. I mean, Putin, his training as a KGB officer was how to manipulate people. And he's done a masterful job for decades now, for a quarter century, of manipulating his Western interlocutors. And Jared Kushner may be brilliant. The rest of the Trump team may be geniuses, everyone. I don't think they are, but maybe they are. But they're just not trained to do this. Putin's trained all his life to manipulate people. And we've got people who at most did a sweetheart real estate deal somewhere.
Steve Witkoff, you mean. And certainly Jared Kushner has had his share of sweetheart deals. Okay, which brings us to this other question about Venezuela. We seem to be more and more dedicated. I believe they're talking about 35% of all of the resources of the U.S. Navy are now deployed around Venezuela. And there has been a great deal of talk about boots on the ground there to try to undo the Maduro regime. There was even a piece in the New York Times, of all places, that said that that kind of effort might work because Maduro is not popular at home. He didn't win any kind of fair or recognizable election. So, what do you think about the prospects of actually putting boots on the ground to attack Venezuela?
Absolutely nuts. Yeah, I'm not the world leading pacifist, as you know, but you know, trying to supposedly stop the flow of drugs into our country by attacking Venezuela is, burning down a Chinese restaurant because you don't like French food. I mean, it's a total non sequitur. Venezuela is not the menace. Venezuela is, to a limited degree, a transit country for some cocaine, mostly going to Europe. It's certainly not a major threat to the U.S. Colombia is a much bigger threat, as of course are the countries further south that actually produce the cocaine. So there's a lot of speculation. Does Trump really just want the oil? Because he certainly doesn't care about freedom and democracy. Um, Michael, it's just so doggone tough right now because this administration, and even setting aside my distaste for Trump and trying to be objective, this is crazy town. Venezuela, look, I have no sympathy with Maduro. I would love to see him gone, but we have other priorities, and a lot of them. And Trump just keeps making a mess everywhere and moving on to the next problem. As far as Venezuela goes, look, yeah, Maduro, bad. Should the U.S. introduce troops to the ground? No. But if Trump wants to send troops to Venezuela, he needs to go through Congress. Congress needs to improve it. The right people need to be briefed. They need to have reasons. They need to show evidence behind closed doors. We don't all get to see what the satellites pick up. But nonetheless, we've got to get back to process. Process matters. The idea that you can just do stuff, and if it doesn't work out, you just walk away from the mess. That's not only not the American way, it's not the common sense way in any government anywhere. And we've got to stop creating new messes, until we at least clean up some of the ones that are on our plate right now. It's a bad.
You talk about a mess that's on the plate right now. President Trump has accused at least 6 Democrats, and by implication many more, of sedition and suggesting that they deserve the death penalty. As someone who has given a quarter century of your life to the military, what about that notion of having to disregard illegal orders?
It's so terribly sad that any president would take this approach. Of course, you don't obey illegal orders. Now, and sometimes they're not clear, but usually, as in a case like this, what was done to that first boat and the 2 temporary survivors was unquestionably a war crime. There's no question about it. And it is the duty of officers, active duty and retired, to speak honestly about these issues, especially for the retired people and for members of Congress. The Uniform Code of Military Justice, the U.S. Constitution, the recognized international laws of war all exist for a good reason. And when we violate them, when we ignore them, it comes back to haunt us every time. So there's so many layers to this, Michael. I'll try to make it as tight as I can. But first of all, for President Trump, who has betrayed America's interests abroad as a minimum, who is betraying our allies, who is befriending, defending, shielding, and helping our nation's traditional enemies and creating new enemies, for that president to accuse those who have served honorably of treason and sedition and what should be executed. Come to your senses, people. Anybody who believes that's correct is utterly wrong. utterly wrong. As far as I'm concerned, there is a traitor here. Whether he's intentionally a traitor or not, Donald Trump betrays our country daily. He betrays our values, betrays our people. He betrays his own followers. The rich tech folks he loves to pal around with, they're not going to go hungry. They don't need food stamps. SNAP program, they snap their fingers. But the people who voted for Trump, who believed his promises, they're victims every bit as much as the people who are dying around the world because we betrayed their trust in Ukraine and elsewhere.
What about the question about the double tap, as it's called, on the boat off the coast of Venezuela in September, where there were two people trying to cling to the remnants of what was left of their boat, who were also hit directly and killed. There are 83 people who have been killed on these attacks so far. If it turns out that you're right and that this was the result of a direct order, Pete Hegseth is saying that it was Admiral Mitchell Bradley who was responsible for that order. Would he be in legal trouble, do you think, with the code of justice, either secular federal law and international law, or the UCMJ?
Michael, we closed down the Nuremberg trials much too early. What happened with those, what purportedly happened, if the reports are true, that we did a double tap on purpose to kill people who were no threat, who could not threaten us, who are not armed, who are hors de combat, as they say, out of combat, that is unquestionably a war crime. You just don't do it. It's a war crime internationally. It's a crime according to our Uniform Code of Military Justice. It violates our Constitution. Now, to be clear, I'm no softy on drugs. I worked for General McCaffrey when he was a drug czar in Washington. I certainly have seen, even in my own family, what drugs can do. I'm no friend of drug traffickers, but the world's laws do need to catch up. We need to deal with them as we once dealt with slave ships after slavery was banned, as we once dealt with pirates. But for now, we've got the law. To paraphrase Donald Rumsfeld, you go to the Caribbean with the laws you've got, not the laws you'd like to have. And at any rate, you simply do not do it. Once people no longer have the will or the ability to fight, people cling to a raft. You just don't kill them. The laws of war, international law, all of it, it's just cut and dried. And another shameful part of this is President Trump and Hegseth suddenly blaming their subordinates. There's an ironclad rule in our military that the commander is responsible for everything his soldiers do or don't do. And at the rate we're going, Hegseth is going to be blaming the guy who cleans the latrines at Lackland Air Force Base for the double tap. I mean, man, be a man. Pete Hegseth, I knew him. He was innocuous at Fox News. I never dreamed he'd be in a position like this. His primary worry was the grease in his hair. But it's amateur hour. I mean, but it would be hilarious if it weren't so deadly, if it weren't so tragic. And, even those two guys in the raft, even if they're notorious drug traffickers, you don't kill people who can't fight back. And, oh, by the way, Mr. President, if you're really serious about drugs, about stopping the flow of drugs to the United States, you don't pardon massive people who have overseen.
Oh, you mean like Juan Hernandez, the former drug-dealing, kingpin president of Honduras?
Yeah, I mean, how can
he was sentenced to 45 years.
Yeah.
And he ended up serving, I think it's less than a month of that time.
Yes, and here's a guy who generally was involved in killing Americans indirectly through drugs. So we've got a situation where Venezuela is no threat to us. It's none whatsoever, but might attack Venezuela without congressional approval or the formal declaration, etc. We're killing people who can't fight back just for yucks, apparently, lying on every side. refusing to support Ukraine, getting beat up by Putin in negotiations. It's so bad.
It's okay.
I'm kind of glad the Republicans actually got a win in Tennessee. They're hurting us so bad. Somebody needed to, do something to make them feel a little bit better about their president. Shameful, shameful, shameful. The people on Capitol Hill, the Republicans who will not stand up to the multiple crimes of this administration, they are the people that are betraying our country, not those 6 veterans who said, you can't obey illegal orders.
Okay, last question, and I know we're running very short on time. Will Europe pick up the slack regarding Ukraine, because Germany and France and other powerful European countries seem right now more determined to help Ukraine survive?
The Europeans will do everything they can. But one thing Trump was right about, and he's been right about some things, he was right that NATO was free riding on us for a long, long time. The Europeans weren't spending on defense. We were defending them. They counted us. Now the Europeans suddenly see the danger of that, and they're scrambling to build their own defenses. So they'll do all they can for Ukraine. But the decisive positive effect would be if the United States would get back on the side of free people and people fighting for the freedom and support Ukraine again, and not just support Vladimir Putin.
Then the information about Ralph Peters and about his most recent books, the Civil War novels, outstanding, and his perspective, his issues papers, outstanding. They're listed at michaelmedved.com. Have a wonderful holiday season, Ralph, and always a joy and an honor to talk to you.